And welcome to the Bechdel Theatre podcast.
The podcast where we talk about gender and representation on stage.
I'm Pippa.
And I'm Beth.
And we're your hosts. So welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This is the podcast coming out in March. Sorry, we missed the February month because it went too quick.
It's really short.
It went far too quick for us.
It's still February.
It's basically February still.
It's February 31st.
Yes, that's exactly how it works. So welcome to the February episode.
What have we been doing?
Oh my god, seeing so many shows.
Vault Festival is on. And we've just been watching so much great stuff and stickering constantly.
Yeah.
So, like, have a look at our social media. You'll see all the shows. Yeah. You'll see all the stickers. And you'll get recommendations for upcoming stuff that we're going to see as well.
Yeah.
We're also doing a live podcast episode.
Woo, woo, woo.
Yay!
Live podcast. So, the last time we did a live podcast.
At Vault. In 2017.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
So we're back, baby.
And then we did another one at Edinburgh Fringe.
Yeah. So this is our third one. I hope it's going to be an improvement from Vaults, because the first time and last time we did our live podcast at Vaults, it was our very second episode ever, and we did it live at Vault. So I feel like we can only be up from there.
And we're at 4:45 in the afternoon, which is the perfect time to come and see us do the podcast, have a little chat with us and our guests, and figure out what shows you want to go and see. And then that same evening, you could go and see a couple of shows at Vault Festival.
The perfect Sunday, if you ask me.
Exactly. Also,
it's Women's Month.
So you'll be feeling very, like, feministy. I'm sure you'll be up for it.
Yeah. Also,
are we allowed to say who the guests are?
I feel like we should, because by the time this is out, it's fine.
Yeah.
So we have some confirmed very special guests. The first being, drumroll please. That was such a dainty drum roll.
I don't have a drum.
Oh.
What am I going to do?
Lynn Gardner.
Gardner.
Queen Lynn is one of our very, very special guests, who's going to be on the podcast with us, and we're really excited to share the stage with
For anyone
her.
who doesn't know, she's a pretty legendary theatre critic, reviewer, writer, person, and we admire her work a lot and think she has a lot of cool things to say. So we're very excited to chat to Lynn. And the other guest is a writer who's not only a theatre critic but also a playwright.
Sorry, it's Arva Wong Davies. Before we
and she's fabulous.
She's a queen. We got some great people on. I'm not gonna lie. And so obviously with that in mind, we're probably, as well as talking about gender and representation on theatre, probably also gonna end up having a bit of a chat about what criticism is and how we feel like it's changing, because that's what we definitely notice.
Are we critics?
Oh, I don't know.
That might be a question that we'll be addressing. And also, like, the festival environment. How does theatre criticism work? Theatre, the hype marketing machine and all of that stuff work around the festival environment?
Exactly. So please come to Vaults, because we're really excited about having this episode. Also, not gonna lie, they're putting us in a fucking huge venue. We have over 170 tickets to sell, and we're not a play. We are a lovely podcast that we normally give to you for free, and so we'd really appreciate it.
We want the loudest, rowdiest feminist audience to scream the house down for representation.
Exactly.
So show up.
And we really want to meet you. So anyway, yeah, we'll see you there on March the 10th. That's what we've been up to. That's what we're going to be doing. But also we have a fabulous, much anticipated interview with the one, the only, Thrustin Limbersnake, aka Lauren Steele from Pecs Drag King Troupe. And so we want you to check it out. Enjoy. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. So, we are joined today by the wonderful Lauren Steele, aka, who you may know her as, Thrustin Limbersnake from the Pecs Drag King Collective. Would you like to say hi, Lauren?
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. Beth.
Are we going to do a pronoun check?
Lauren, what pronoun would you like to use?
She, her.
And is Thrustin a he, him? When we're referring to your drag persona?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
He, him.
Good to know. So, this episode has been like a long time in the making because we have been fans and followers of Pecs for so long now. So, I thought we could start with the genesis in and of itself of Pecs. Because you all met at uni, is that right?
Yes, most of us. We've, there are some additions.
Yeah.
But, we, like, the original crew, which then developed and expanded, we met at uni at Cambridge, and I was actually in the middle of taking her out to be women's officer, and we kind of got together, and Temmie and Celine had this like epiphany moment at party, been like, wait, could we do drag kings? Is that a thing? Like, because there was lots of drag queens and stuff that were around at uni, but we'd never really heard of drag kings before, and it hadn't been something people had really explored. There was like a gender fuck ball, or like there was a kind of, what was it called?
Cool.
It was a kind of gender, it was a drag ball basically, but that was the only time that anyone did any drag really, apart from this particular other group, and so we all got together and workshopped and basically came up with some, like, we practiced like doing makeup and like getting into the physicality and like thinking of different types of masculine tropes or characteristics or stereotypes, like firemen, policemen, like like Grease, like kind of like pop culture, like nostalgic films that we'd like grown up with, and it just kind of went from there. A lot of it, definitely for me, a lot of the acts came from music and dancing and like particular pop icons that I felt like I could emulate or like wanted to kind of explore that kind of masculinity, as I felt like that was kind of something that felt quite natural and part of me anyway, and the way that I moved or the way that I like to dance. So and I think people kind of use that, like maybe an element of themselves or how they carry themselves, but kind of heightened it or explored what that meant to them in terms of finding their particular king.
So who were the original kind of, I guess, founding
what year
fathers?
was it? I'm wanting to know, like, how long has this been going on? Because you're so like well established now, and
this
like,
iconic party that happened.
Yeah.
I think
such
it's
a
been
fan
like
base.
5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
That was 2013, 14.
Me and Celine at a party,
and then we got everyone together. So Rosie, Vic, Helena, me, Kit, and Temmie. Yeah, obviously, I don't want to forget anyone. And then Katie, who's Luce Willis, came in, and then Jodie joined actually just like a year and a half ago. And then we later, like a couple of years ago, our producers came on. So we'd kind of founded and did a few shows together. Our first one on the Battersea Barge, which was like literally, I think that was in 2014, like, and then we did Café des Hommes, and then Tipping the Top Hat, so like a Parisian themed one.
Ooh. So was
Kentish
this in
Town.
London then?
Yeah.
So you started off when you were at uni, but then once you were graduated.
Some of us were still at uni. We were doing it like on the side, or in our like holidays or.
Oh, I
God, that's a
see.
big deal, because I have a couple of friends who went to Cambridge and they were like, the workload is insane, like how on earth did you manage to get this huge project off the ground while being at uni on like a degree that's notoriously
It was very intense.
big.
Oh, can I ask what you studied?
Yeah. Education with English and drama.
Ooh.
Yeah. But everyone did kind of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really intense. Temmie and Celine had graduated, so they had a bit more time, and they were trying to like get their own careers like off the ground. So it was something that was very much like a passion project, that they could give more time to. I was doing women's officer, and it was very intense. Actually, in one of our first like rehearsal periods, I was like in between acts, like launching a massive survey and like doing all of this other work. But we've always kind of had quite a short rehearsal period and like turnover time with our shows, so it has very much been like, okay, keep this time free, like, and it being very like fast paced. And then we took 1 year out. Temmie and Celine were studying or doing kind of placements, and I think that kind of fit at the same time with some of us doing our third year. So we had a bit of a year break and then came back to it and continued to
And that's probably where we started hearing about Pecs, and
probably, I don't know.
around
Yeah, we
about
had some big gigs. We
2016,
did
2017.
Brainchild,
Yeah.
That was the first time I saw you.
which I think, for the first time, that was quite, I think, a
Everyone's
big moment.
like struggling to get inside the big
Yeah.
dome, and it was like overflowing.
Well, we did, that was amazing a couple of years ago, but we did it 2 years before that, 4 years ago, and so, and then we'd done a few like Tate Lates or like takeovers with a Pride, like for London Pride, Brighton Pride, some Tate Lates, Royal Vauxhall Tavern special, like a few of those. But it's I think it was after we did the 80s show at the Glory, and that was when that summer it was like doing like bigger festivals and like quite a few, and like the Tate again and like Pride, and that was very much like everyone's like based in London now, everyone's ready to like.
And then the 80s show went to Soho Theatre.
Yeah.
And that's where it started kind of seeming like, oh wow, this has gone from being a company that we know from like parties and festivals to being like, wow, like legit, like full blown theatre show with like all the trimmings on it and the sold out in a major theatre. Yeah. And that show was incredible. Like I remember saying after we went to see that show, like I never really had that feeling of like being a boy band fan. And I knew a lot of people who were.
That's what I say to so many people. I'm like, it's like I get to fall in love with the boy bands that I never liked when I was younger.
Yeah, I never was like that. Like screaming hordes of like teenage faces, and it really felt like everyone was kind of living that moment. Like the moment when Pecs came out on stage in Soho, it was like you could just feel the kind of, I don't know, pheromones rising in the room, and everyone just like lost their minds. It was it was like I've never seen anything like it.
It's great to harness that as adults as well, because you
Yeah.
don't really get that anymore.
It's such a like a release,
teenage
like
feeling.
like that kind of teen, like I can let loose and just scream if I want to, like, or like just and just be like silly and like fancy. But
Did you get fans throwing themselves at you after the Soho shows?
Okay.
Thrustin is like, he's a pretty...
So we should explain for the listeners about Thrustin. So Thrustin Limbersnake is Lauren's drag alter ego. How did you come up with him? He was based in dancing and music that you connected with.
Justin Timberlake.
Based
basically.
on Justin.
And me and Temmie very early on, actually, for some of the first few acts, started to do like double acts. So like we did 1, 2 Happy, like Justin and Pharrell, and then we did like suit and tie, and then I did like Senorita, and then it like has just kind of developed from there, and I've just done all of the Justin.
Done all of the Justin now. Have to do other stuff.
But it was it was kind of like, what actual boys/men are there that I feel like, but aren't so bad, but also dance, and I feel like I want to like, that's the kind of dance.
Are you ever worried that he'll do anything like even more problematic, and you'll be like, oh no, Justin?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely think like it's something to always take into consideration when coming up with acts. It's like we don't want to reinforce or represent particular public figures that are you know problematic, or like have paved in bad ways,
which most of them have.
Yeah. So it is hard.
Yeah.
Like, most
Just like
famous
when you
men
do the 80s show,
bad.
it's great because you do queer icons, and you're like, okay, I can feel like a sense of like security in these people.
Yeah. Even amongst queer icons, you got David Bowie going around shagging teenage girls.
I mean,
like,
true.
not okay, Bowie. No.
Yes. So
it's tricky, but also incredibly sexy. I have a lot of memories of teenage parties. I had a friend who used to, like, who was notorious for always doing like the Justin Timberlake dances, and it was I wonder if she listens to the podcast. It was like a sort of, you know, like distinctive memory in my mind of this person at parties doing the sexy Justin Timberlake dances way better than any of the boys did, and all of the girls being like, oh my god, she's so hot. Oh my god, that's amazing. So when I saw you doing like a Justin inspired act, I was like, oh my god, I'm 14 all over again.
I need to meet this girl.
Well.
Could do a little double act.
Justin. I wonder if she ever does it now as party trick.
Yeah.
Justin dance off.
Yeah. Oh my
That's
goodness.
so fun.
Wow. I was going to ask how you think, because you've kind of spoken a bit about the acts that you've made. Has there been like a significant change, you think, from what, like the kind of like acts you made at the beginning and like what you kind of focus on now, either as yourself or like as the collective?
Yes. Yes, just some extent. I think personally for me, I think over the past year and like with the 80s show, like doing George Michael is very different from doing Thrustin, and that does kind of feel like an alternative king, but I just don't have like a name, a particular like name, and it's kind of hard. I was like, this is hard because that is what my drag king name is and what people know me as and what lots of my acts are like, and doing the group, like helping to choreograph group dances or choreographing like XYZ, but doing the dirty dancing and is a different vibe as like Patrick Swayze to George Michael to Justin Timberlake. And then but it's also really fun because it's like tapping into that like camp / kind of butch but very camp at the same time masculinity and emulating that, and I love that too. So it's like really fun exploring those different energies.
Have similarities. They're all quite hip based. Quite
the Thrustin.
Thrustin is a theme. Like not just thrusting, but thrusting of the hips is like a thing you can return to with all of those boys.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yes. Very
Signature
sexual
moves.
energy.
Yeah.
Through movement, I guess, and through and then with this show, our upcoming show, Sex Men, I feel like even yesterday in rehearsals I was kind of thinking, this is Justin feels like the safe one to like return to if I'm like get into the mind of your drag king, because I've been doing that kind of masculine energy for the longest, but in this show again there are actually lots of different vibes. There's a kind of like very heteronormative sexual sexy mask energy vibe within like a stripper like just in movement type vibe, but then even within that there are camp elements. And it's like, okay, we're super hetero and macho, but actually it's like, but it's kind of homoerotic when you're all stripping together at the same time.
Oh my god, yeah. I just remembered the show.
But then, yeah, there's another act that we've developed that is very much like queer love, and like masculine, like a kind of masculine butch bear love, and we've changed and developed that act to give it like, so that it kind of sits in between this like butch, quite like leather mask vibe, and quite a like soft queer love, romantic camp vibe. So again, that's like quite, and that's quite, it's oddly specific because it's like but it's like a nice little melding of all of these kinds of masculinities that come into one, and then it's quite its own thing. And then hyper performative, very camp, but masculinity, yeah. And I think they all feel quite different now. And again, like with the trailer, I don't know if you've seen it, but our group dance and trailer to Boys is again like a very
so
like
so much
soft
pink.
boy,
Yeah.
like it kind of reminds me of like this kind of like lefty soft like I'm a feminist,
Yeah.
I'm really woke, soft boy, I look cute,
Yeah.
I'm gonna take care of you, but like and like and that's like a whole other, it's like still feels like quite like heteronormative in its masculinity, but it's like this like almost like a commentary on that kind of soft boy aesthetic and politics as well to an extent, but that is kind of hot too.
Yeah. It's
Them.
very hot. We're going to link to the trailer so that our listeners can get a visual for this.
Yeah.
Because it's a very specific style of imagery that you're going for. It also does feel, because I haven't seen Sex, Sex, Men, Men, but I love the 80s show, and it feels like it's quite a different vibe in that it's maybe more about sort of masculinity and like real people and real feelings than it is about paying tribute to pop icons.
Oh yeah,
Like-
yeah,
like-
totally.
Because the 80s show felt like the pop icons were the inspiration, and then everything else was kind of bubbling underneath. All of the stuff about kind of gender and queerness, and it's kind of a celebration of
Yeah.
that, but very kind of cartoonish.
Yeah.
Whereas Sex, Sex, Men, Men seems a bit more, I don't want to say subtle, because I've heard that there's a massive gold dildo in it. Spoiler. But like subtle, or maybe like in the way that it's, I don't know, it feels a bit more realistic.
Yeah. More
A
grounded.
bit more based in people that you know,
Right.
rather than people that you see in pop videos.
Right.
Maybe?
Yeah. Or a
Yeah.
mixture.
Mm.
I think also something that's, rather than it being this like hyper real at a distance, oh look at this kind of masculinity that we're used to and that we've seen before, but it's done by women and non-binary people. Ooh, what does that mean? How does that impact my own reaction
Yeah.
sexually, or like within my sexuality?
Yeah.
Or how I interpret that movement or that person on stage. But yeah, actually now it's kind of like, it is more personal, and it's also trying to explore, I think, the huge range of like how gender and sexual desire, or sexuality in and of itself, can be vulnerable and can be playful and can be quite macho, or like almost toxic, or it can be celebratory, and it can be, so like part of what the show wants to do is to really like unpick in a more, I guess, direct way how specifically men and masculinity and sexual desire or sexuality interact. And and with boys there's like this vulnerability that's like grounded in particular people you can think of, particular people you know, or a particular subculture, but then there are acts which explore like fetish and or like power play, and again that is kind of vulnerable because we don't, and it's taboo because we don't, that's not really necessarily part of mainstream culture. It might be a bit more part of queer culture, but actually to perform that on stage and show like a masculine energy performing some of those power play or like particular fetish food play that is, and sploshing, that is quite, it's kind of unusual. Some of it really subverts the stereotype that we might subconsciously have in our head that it would usually be a woman or a feminine person. And I think a lot of the show really wants to like take the audience on a journey from like more stereotypical like representations of like macho, masculine, heteronormative, kind of empowering, but also like I guess that kind of like performativity of like this is what hetero masculine sexuality is, to exploring like toxic masculinity and within sexual desire and sexual, you know, like in terms of the society, in terms of the culture we live in, is one in which is like has rape culture and has like you know, it is difficult to live in as a woman or a non-binary person, and I think it's obviously very different experiences, but I think it's important to explore that and then move on to some representations of like queer masculinity and queer sexual desire and queer love, and then fetish and play and and then vulnerability. And I think a lot of this show is much more intimate as well within the cast. Like we know each other so well, we've been working together for 5-6 years and we're all such good friends, and we all have an unbelievable amount of trust and love for each other, that it has been amazing and like so overwhelmingly joyful to go through this experience of being vulnerable and bringing parts of our self, exposing parts of ourself physically and emotionally, and
it's potentially quite a difficult topic in the rehearsal room, I think. You know, you hear a lot in the theatre industry about like intimacy training and finding safe ways as performers to explore things like sexuality and vulnerability and emotional intensity. I guess it kind of comes maybe with a bit more naturally if you've been working together for such a long time, but like I'm quite interested in how that worked practically in the rehearsal room.
Yeah, totally. Well, like I think the whole politics around consent then enters the rehearsal room and the whole show, and when it will be live as well, performed live in a much more like real and practical way. Obviously there should always be, I think, consent politics brought anywhere or like within the rehearsal room anyway, but particularly around these more sensitive issues to do with sexuality and intimacy, it's so important. And one thing that we've done, even when we developed it back in the summer, is create like ground rules or like a group agreement around what we feel comfortable with. So always being able to leave the room if we want to, always being able to opt in or out of particular behaviours or acts or stripping, having options like within the live performance too, but within the rehearsal room of like how, you know, to what extent or how far you go with the stripping or with the sexual acts, and being able to pause and just completely stop when in the middle and like have a break, or check-in. And I think one thing that's been really important is having group check-ins for the day, but check-ins for when you start every new different act, and making sure that if we're talking about potentially triggering subjects or content, that there is content warnings before we speak, or particular trigger words or whatever that everyone's aware of, and that has actually worked so well, and created such a safe space, and it means that even when we will be going in to do the live shows, some acts which involve sexual intimacy will have options that those two performers will be able to decide on and consent to live.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, so, and actually within some of these some of the acts, I think there are quite a few that have sexual acts. I am also in one which will, again, like, I can opt in or out if I want to, say for example, if I don't want to kiss, or and there will be intimacy check-in before every show with the stage manager, so we can say, actually today I don't feel great, I'm not going to do that, or I'm going to strip to my pants rather than something taking them off, or I'm going to with this particular thing. And then we all check in with our like our partner, or like in those acts too before the show, so we say, how are you doing, what do you want to do, how are you feeling about the act, and so that we can check in one-on-one too with that person, and it's essentially up to us. There's no pressure, and we also can there are also options, and so some acts will have, like, I think they've actually developed, one particular act I'm thinking of that I'm not in, they've developed like basically a different act that they can choose between and opt in or out of, and consent and communicate live. And again, that will be with those sexually intimate or romantically intimate acts. That's something that's, like, encouraged, and I think also is really great and radical to be able to, for audiences to see that on stage, because that is actually how
sex works
how
in
sex
real life.
works, and how it should be in real life, and how it should then therefore be represented.
And performers are human beings, not you're going to see live theatre. You're not pressing a DVD where the same thing happens every single time. Like, you're going to see a real person on stage. I feel like so many other companies could take this as a role model. Like, it doesn't have to be done just because it was done that one way in rehearsals.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean you want to do that same thing every single night.
Yeah, and it's amazing because it does genuinely make all the performers feel so safe that then you just automatically feel better and more
ready to
to be vulnerable and to engage. But also it means that there's, like, you don't have to feel that anxiety or that, like, worry that you're not good enough, or you're not doing it right if you do opt out.
That kind of projects onto the audience as well then, and the audience will hopefully feel much more safe than potentially in other either theatre environments or, like, drag and cabaret environments. I'm thinking I've seen a few cabaret shows where performers have sort of I don't know, maybe
revealed themselves in a vulnerable way.
I don't know, maybe, like, I felt a bit like the performer was maybe not okay, and they felt like they had to go through with it because that's the act that they'd come up with, and maybe I felt like, oh god, I'm not sure if this person is, like,
have they processed
have
it?
they or and are they able to have that thought in their mind, is this what I want to be doing right now? Or are they feeling quite pressured because we're here as the audience? Are we putting pressure on them to do their act and take more clothes off when you're doing the whole cabaret whooping and cheering? Yeah, come on, get your pants off. And if that performer doesn't want to, like, have they been given permission within their staging to go, cool, that's the end of the act now? And also, like, in terms of audience consent as well, because I, on the flip side, have seen acts that feel very, like, empowered to, you know, project their sexuality out into the room, which is great, but then maybe they'll go up to an audience member and kind of like have that boundary line between consent of, like, does the audience member want to take part in that? Is the audience member happy that then suddenly the rest of the audience is looking at them and expecting them to participate in whatever way that they're...
I feel like that must be a benefit of, like, working together and, like, being a collective and also having directors, because most people who work in cabaret don't really have anyone else watching their acts until, like, it's on stage and they're performing it live.
And might not have anyone else there, like, supporting them. If you're a solo cabaret performer and you've showed up at a show, you might not know anyone in the audience, you might not know the other performers, you might not know the person who's running the gig, so you're putting yourself in kind of like a, you know... Where maybe if they could have an internal Pecs voice being like, my consent is important, you know, like... And I also feel like in the drag king world in particular, like, when you are exploring issues like you mentioned, toxic masculinity, it can take you to a place when you're performing masculinity where I think I see a lot of drag kings and no, I sometimes feel like, oh God, am I doing this myself? Where I might be, like, kind of performing toxic masculinity in a way that might be quite upsetting.
Doesn't challenge it, just
perpetuates it.
Yeah, it's a hard line.
It is a hard line. And when we've learned masculinity from a world where a lot of the role models are quite toxic and not okay, it's like, how do we then find a way to explore that both challenges it and kind of, like, I don't know, connects to our own versions of what is masculinity without toxicity.
So difficult.
And how can you do it without going on stage and being that toxic man?
Yeah.
Like,
without reinforcing that and something that's so prevalent and like...
and we've learned it.
Yeah, and can be really triggering as well. Like, just generally quite difficult, I think, for as a performer, but also as the audience. And another element that we did with live drafts too was give trigger warnings at the beginning, and also, like, invite, kind of, like, create a space where the audience feels like a kind of participatory, but like a guest, and they, you know, they are within our consensual boundaries too. They can leave too if they want. They can leave and come back in. They can
so much theatre where you don't feel like you can leave the room, and if you do leave the room, you won't be allowed back in again. Right. It's the worst thing when you walk into an auditorium, and they're like, just so you know, if you leave, you won't be admitted at all, and you're like, oh no, I'm trapped. Like,
that's not.
I've been to see shows where I've felt incredibly, like, emotionally disturbed by what I'm seeing on stage, and thought, if I could go out and have a 2-minute break, I could come back in again and enjoy the rest of the play. All I would need is, like, 5 seconds in the toilet to splash some water on my face. But knowing that I can't leave without missing the rest of it is like, you sit there sort of melting.
I really don't think I really have a problem with that. But yeah, like,
Sorry,
Pippa's just distracted by the rabbit. Mid-conversation.
I'm so sorry.
I told you he does this when all the gals are chatting. Okay, listeners, there's a rabbit in the room.
There's, like, a beautiful snow bunny.
So tiny.
That is
so fluffy.
Currently asleep and twitching. Sorry, I just got distracted by the bunny.
Your face was great.
I was just like, ultimately.
Flopped out Flopsy. Where were we?
Yeah, no, I didn't respond. To the representation around toxic masculinity, I think, can be really hard, because it was something we were, like, not sure whether to include, because we didn't really include it in live drafts, but it was quite a careful, sensitively broached subject that we talked about all together. And kind of collaboratively said, okay, if we're going to broach this, what do we want it to be? I guess putting in some, like, those safeguarding rules to that too, and trying to ensure that everyone that there are people within the cast to like maybe do some aftercare for that person, and really thinking about what is the impact on the audience, is that worth doing. It's so important to think about that when you're representing that kind of masculinity, because it's like we don't want to purposefully put, you know, especially the queer community, through something that is so damaging and destructive and prevalent, and is something trying to escape. And like
carefully.
Yeah, you've got to do that carefully.
It's not a binary. There's like an overlap, you know. It's not like, oh, this is good masculinity, this is bad masculinity. Like there's it's tied up, it's complicated, it's
exactly
knotty and dense, and you can't really be like, now we're toxic, now we're not, la la la. Like
yeah, exactly.
Where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
You just mentioned something about like I'm assuming predominantly that the Pecs audiences are queer. Do you ever get like straight men who might have come with friends or partners who ever come up to you and have like particular surprising opinions, or like the non-typical audience member reacts strongly?
Yes, actually at the last at the Pecs party at the Vaults, there was this guy in the loos who was like, I am so confused. I've never felt this way before. What is going on? Like, it was genuinely like, it's really sexy, and I don't, like, just so confused.
I love that reaction. That's great.
And like, and like we have had that, I guess, since we started, because it's this kind of like, they don't like go fully into it because they haven't processed or thought, like, fully explored what it is that they find sexy. And obviously I don't want to project what that might be, but you know, maybe it's like, oh, actually it's masculinity that's really hot, or maybe it's like, oh, it's this like confidence, or like of this woman or person like just embodying and being empowered in their body and just taking up space, which like is really sexy, right? Confidence is hot. But I don't know. It's quite, it's very
Because
quite
I mean,
interesting.
Vaults was a huge audience. It was like 500-600 people.
It was huge, and there were a lot of straight men.
Oh yeah, I feel like that's the most I've
The
seen.
Vault crowd.
straight
Yeah, it was
men
a much more mixed crowd. There was a lot of people in drag as well, though, which was really cool.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. I have different relationships with straight men when I'm in drag. I'm much more like pally, like, if that's do you know what I mean? Like, they'll all kind of high five me and be like, and sort of treat me like one of them, and I feel like, oh my god, this is so weird. It's like, it's not like a bad, I've never had like a horrible bad reaction, but it's interesting.
It's like a cross the threshold.
I'm just thinking about the, you know, when we did a cabaret show last year, and like, I don't do much drag king, I'm fairly new to it, but like, we were talking to the other performers, and I was like, oh, you know, does anyone go home and drag? And like, the majority of all the other performers online were like, no, like, I've had only bad experiences, like going home and drag, like, I don't feel safe. And like, it's interesting to think about
that night I went home with my beard still on, and someone was like on the bus like, oh, what is it?
Oh god.
It's not great.
But I think it's very different being in a public transport space going home with like drunk people than it is being in the cabaret space where if there is somebody there who is new to seeing somebody in drag, they aren't, like, they're in our space rather than we're outside in the world, confusing them in their daily life, how dare we, rather than like in our little, they've come in and bought a ticket to the show, or they've come in with their friend who, you know, it's it's a different thing, isn't it?
But but I guess also it's like this interesting, it's an assumption that's made as well by cis men that like masculinity is just for them.
They don't
and
own
like
it.
and it's like that actually masculinity or masculine energy or isn't, it's obviously it can be for anyone, but it's it's not just for them. But I think, as you know, one of the main reasons of doing drag king is to be like, masculinity isn't neutral, it's performative, and like you might think that's normal, and okay, you've crossed the threshold into my normal, and so we're pals now, we're bros.
Yeah.
But it's like still them like trying to then own it by being like, okay, cool, I'm gonna take control of like how we interact now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't have this experience, but I've definitely, you know, talking to friends or who maybe present a bit more masculine or identify as more butch, like feel that their cis male friends just treat them like bros, and objectify women with them in the same way, or XYZ, do you know what I mean? So I guess like, yeah, it's a weird one, because it's like, whereas I just like usually just feel sexualized or objectified, which of course like I am doing on stage. I am doing.
You're being
that.
very sexy.
But after Soho as well, it was interesting because like the George Michael act in particular had a lot of queer or like gay men coming up at the end and being like,
interesting,
just massively hitting on me, but also being very confused because they're like, wait, I really fancy you, want to get with you, but also like, fuck, what's going on? And so that was really interesting. I think the George Michael, that was fun to get some like queer, gay,
different types of Pecs groupies.
Up and down, really, can you? Who enjoys Pecs? Everyone.
Literally everyone.
Moving slightly away from masculinity per se, you and I share something in common in that we've both done Ruby Jones's Queerlesque course. And she was a previous guest of ours. And I was wondering what maybe kind of like what drew you to that, and did you go in with the intention of not being thrust in, or did that come separately, and how did it feel?
I did. I went in with the intention of exploring femness and like my femininity, and it was very different because I was just so like I've been so used to like impersonating Thrustin, and it's just like ingrained, like a kind of like default, but it was great. And I think my relationship with like drag kinging is very much like dress up and put on this like confident swag alter ego where I can like dance, like basically do like hip hop or like dance in this certain way that feels great to me, and where I can take up space, like, and fully own the stage. Whereas like I think, but without feeling as objectified, whereas like obviously that hasn't, after our conversation, hasn't really turned out. But it's slightly different because it's different from like, it does feel different from me. Like I feel like I have, of course, like I have like many very in quotes masculine traits, but I think as me, if I'm going on a night out, I want to dance like a femme queen. And like so I wanted to explore that and like feel, especially like within my body, like feel connected to my body in a way that like I don't really feel I'm exploring as a drag king, because it's not, that like gendered aspect isn't there for me as much, whereas like I identify as like female and like within wanted to like embrace the femininity of the way I moved my body and the way I felt about my body, in quite a more body positive way. So I absolutely loved it, but I wanted to kind of the act I did was very much like, again, hyper feminine, like Marilyn Monroe, like glam, like
Got the hair for it.
Yeah, like on this wig, did this, but it was also about like having that performative, like hyper femme sexuality, but that being that's the expectation, is that like you must always smile, you must always be hyper beautiful and hyper sexy and look perfect in XYZ ways. And it kind of had these clips that were of Marilyn in interviews talking about having to perform this like natural and spontaneous femininity when it wasn't at all. It was completely fake and false. She was experienced many mental health problems, and I think it was like I was trying to expose that kind of vulnerability with that like hyper performative assumption of what femininity is, and also exposing physically my naked body, which was like a massive deal for me, and like but came in very handy when developing this the Pecs show, because I do a lot of stripping in it too, and
gosh.
still processing.
Beth's blushing.
I'm in the show yet, and I'm already like, I can't handle it.
There's so much stripping.
Oh my
There's
god.
so much nakedness. But yeah, like, but it's something that, I kind of still feel like I'm in the process of,
Finding.
Yeah.
I find that because like I only in like the past year or so been like, I want to like start doing cabaret, and I keep on like doing bit of drag kinging and then a bit of like the burlesque, and I keep finding myself at a crossroads of like, what do I want to explore? And every time I've been a drag king, I felt a bit like, but I haven't fully properly processed and celebrated how it means to be like feminine or femme, and it feels weird that whenever I do that, I feel like I need to go back first and be like, I need to like explore and find this so that I can then do the flip side and explore the masculine side. But it's interesting.
Yeah. No, I feel you, and like I feel that I think I had done I'm just going back to the journey of Lauren now. But at school there was so much like, it felt like returning in some ways to burlesque, like brought so much back from like going to like this all-girls school where like...
I went to an all-girls school.
Where like, it was like super high pressured, like beauty standards, like clothes, make everything, fake tan, everything was just so heteronormative and so the bar was just so high. Like basically you had to look like a celebrity, and you had to wear a different dress, a bodycon dress to every single party, and like wear heels and XYZ, and I was just like, oh my god. And I remember hating it at the time, but also just wanting to like fit in or like in some way have a social experience. But it was so like even at school, because I was like in this push-pull of being like, okay, I guess I like, this makes me feel sexy, or like to some extent also I don't actually like this performativity of it, and I like started a feminist club in sixth form.
Oh my god, amazing!
Oh my god.
Did it have a name? What was it called?
It was just, what was it? No, it was just like Feminist Club.
Feminist Club. How attended was it? Were
so
people like
cute.
anti it, or were they like for it? Like
They were kind of anti it. This is back in like 2009.
Yeah.
Like a decade ago. And they were kind of for it, but they wouldn't come. Even my friends wouldn't come, and it would end up being like a general chat in the common room.
right.
But then I just was so impassioned and like so angry that like I kind of had to end up tapping out of some of it, but I did like start doing a lot of research, and I think I was just so I just hated the gender dynamics even then at school, and just like the expectations, all of the assumptions that were just constantly made. So when I then did go to when I was at uni, it was just suddenly this like a sigh of relief of like, I don't have to wear heels. Oh, I don't have to wear this. Cool. Also, I can just wear jeans to the club. Great.
Yeah.
And like that still feels good. I know. Like
God.
what?
Who knew?
This is fascinating to me because I did not go to an all-girls school and did not experience any of this stuff. And it's weird that like in a mixed gender school that the gender sort of, I mean, maybe that was just me being a bit like contrary, but yeah, there was in my friendship groups no expectation of like wearing a different dress to every party or like having a fake tan or whatever. But maybe that's like an unusual experience. But like it's really fascinating to me that this has happened within, because you'd think like the only reasoning you could possibly have for like gender segregated schools would be like to stop that stuff from happening, to stop people from wearing like, oh, I have to wear makeup and perform femininity for like, you know.
I think there was a mix at my school, I have to say. Like a lot of us didn't wear, I don't know, there was like, I don't know, the classic kind of like cool girls that were really into their fake tan and like probably had the most money and like would dress up and stuff like that. But I think for most of us, it like there was a delay in those kinds of things. Like, there was a delay in people having relationships, I think, than in my friends who were in mixed schools. And there was like a delay in people caring about that kind of stuff a bit more. But like,
that's what
so
I mean.
know,
I just
isn't it?
imagine that girls' schools were like this, like, you know, like no one wore makeup and like everyone was probably snogging each other all the time.
Vaguely.
No. Only no.
No, it's more like yeah.
No, it was just such a like queerness just wasn't acceptable.
I think it was like in my school. I don't know, because then I went to school in Brighton, so like. You know,
weird.
It's maybe a bit more of an anomaly, but in the sense that there wasn't any homophobia, but like I remember feeling like, but I can't be that girl who's at an all-girls school and then ends up being gay.
Right,
like,
exactly. It's like
I have
even
I'm either
worse.
a slag or I'm gay, and I was like, I don't want to be either of them, but I know I'm secretly both.
Yeah. Damn it. Yeah, totally. But yeah, anyway, so then I think I did so much of processing at uni, and then obviously like got involved in activism and like grassroots campaigning, and so I think through that like had done a lot of the like theoretical feminist application.
Got the old Judith out.
The Judith, like, and I like really did
Get that Judith.
but I like really did try and put that into practice like at uni. So like now returning to that, it's interesting because it's like I felt like I'd gone through some of that like process of being like, okay, yeah, like I accept this and I'm gonna grow out on my body hair and I'm gonna try XYZ and explore that, but returning to it after feeling like I couldn't, or like it's something that it is so important to me, and I think it's definitely something I want to continue doing, and like I want to do more projects outside of Pecs that are more like cool, it's me, or it's like femme burlesque cabaret vibes. Because I love that.
We want to see it.
Do you ever feel like when you're in like femme burlesque, do you ever feel like you're in drag? Like, because I definitely feel like when I put on a lot of makeup, like a lot of like
when
glitter,
we go to Pecs,
when we go to
like,
Pecs,
I need to femme
and
up.
we femme up, it feels almost as though I'm putting on drag. Like
totally. It is
because it's performing
like,
gender in such a conscious way.
Yeah, I felt like that,
and
like because it was like going back to being a teenager, being like, oh, I have to think about all this. And in a way, it was a bit like flashbacky, like stress, but also it was like, okay, no, like that is basically what we were hardcore doing, but in real life.
Lipstick and read Judith Butler.
Yeah, but it was really fun, and it's fun to like really heighten that and be
Yeah.
like, cool, like how far can I push it, and like what does that feel like? But it was definitely very like an emotional process, like as soon, because I was very naked and like,
Good for you.
yeah, it was fun. I was just like see-through little sparkly leotard, got my butt out with covered in glitter, got my little boobies out, and like did a fan dance. So it was very like, but yeah, I just like cried and I burst into tears after getting off, because I was just like, oh, that felt so exposing.
I'm worried that's going to happen to me when I do
It happened to a lot of
showcase.
people. Like when we went to see the burlesque showcase, there was quite a few people coming off stage in like a really heightened emotional state, and it actually felt really good being in the audience. I was like, wow, I feel like I've been on a journey with these people, like having not done the burlesque course myself, but knowing that it's, you know, it's a bit of a journey and it's a very personal thing for a lot of people, and then seeing them coming off stage and like hugging their friends or their partners or whatever, I just felt very like, I felt very emotional by the end of it. I'd shed a few tears, like
I think it being
watching
RVT
people make
as
their
well,
burlesque
like, made a
debut.
big difference in terms of like knowing the audience are rooting for you. Whatever body, whatever expression, like, you know,
and
like,
the intimacy of the venue and everyone's there. I was just like, oh, it was such relief to just like sob and be like, oh my god, I just did that. I would never have ever dreamed of doing that, like as I am, you know, as I am now, when I was, you know, 10 years ago. And so it's like a journey of self-acceptance and like, and I think I'm still on that, but and this show will also be part of that. Because it is so exposing and feels so vulnerable, even if, because everyone can react differently and everyone has their own internal monologue of self-acceptance. So
thinking about what you just said about, you know, journeys at school, and especially like the process of I don't know, like having your kind of like second adulthood when you're kind of queer and stuff like that, I was thinking we could move on to our feminist faves, who we recommend for our listeners for this month, because I know that you mentioned who yours was, and that reminds me of that journey.
Oh yes.
So who is your feminist? Who is your feminist fave?
Yeah. My feminist fave is the lol word. We love them.
Yeah, we just saw them last night, and so obviously their current show is Prom.
Yes, their current show is Prom, and they've just had a new Vaults, and they've had a new date added, which is the 28th of March, and it's themed around the journey from prom at school and the heteronormative glory of that to to now. It's amazing and I love it, but also the lol word is every final Thursday of the month at the Albany too, if you don't catch them at Vaults. Amazing women and non-binary queer lineup of comedians. Made me like comedy again.
Before that,
didn't like it.
Really?
Yeah.
It's that I can understand, because it's that thing where like my idea of comedy has been so steeped in like it's stale pale male, like it's, you know,
It's offensive.
Yeah.
I can't go without leaving furious and ready to have a fight. Whereas like went to see this and was like, oh wow, it's different when you see representations that relate to you.
What?
It's like duh,
like,
but
it
also
can be for me.
Yeah, when you're in
you
on the
can be
joke
funny.
instead of the butt of the joke.
Exactly, so yes, it's changed. It's been a revelation.
Yeah.
Who's your feminist fave, Beth?
My feminist fave kind of relates to like what we've been talking about in terms of journeys. Is the whole of Generation Z. Basically.
Ooh, yes.
I've been really inspired recently because I've been thinking back a lot recently. I dug out my prom photos. I've been thinking about my teenage years recently, and I've been thinking like, what's the difference between teenagers when I was a teenager and teenagers now? And recently there's been all these kids striking from school because of climate change and saying like we want our governments to do something about this across the world, led by this Greta Thunberg, I think her name is, and everywhere they've been going on strike and saying this is not good enough, and also the teenagers in America protesting for gun control, and I just think, my God, when I was at school, we like walked out of lessons in protest of the Iraq War, which ages me, and it felt like at the time like kind of we were sort of using the news as an excuse to skip class, and maybe like 70% of us were just like, way bunking off, and 30% of us were like, boo, Tony Blair, like, and I was kind of somewhere in between. I was like, boo, Tony, oh, skip class, yeah. And yeah, but it feels so much more like this generation now, whenever I talk to anyone who's sort of in the generation below, who is in that kind of sixth form school age, even starting uni, I think, my God, you're like 80% politically aware and 20% bunking off school, you know? Like, there's never not an element of I want to bunk off school, but like, there's so much more into all this stuff. Like, the idea when we were young of starting a feminist society in sixth form is like, lol, as if we did that. But nowadays, I bet every sixth form has like feminist societies. You get little like teenage girls being like, yeah, I'm a feminist, I'm not going to take any, and it's just so cool. I just think Generation Z might be going to save the world.
Yay.
And
the world does need saving.
it needs please help us.
I was trying to think of mine. I'm going to recommend a book as my feminist fave, because a friend of mine is starting a queer book club and I'm so excited, and we're on the first book. It's by Queen Jeanette Winterson, and I think it's called Written on the Body, and it's this book that explores romance and sexuality, and it's like very visceral, and it's about like women in relationships, and it's just beautiful. And you know, when I'm not a writer, and whenever I read something that just so perfectly encapsulates like an emotion, I do not understand how people do that, because it's not something I could ever do. That I could never express that feeling of love like in words. I feel like it's very like inexpressible, and she just manages to do it so well and capture like the longing of like relationships and love, and when they break down and when they work and when there's affairs and like complications that add to it and stuff like that. And it was written in the 90s, and which I think also like has a bit of a different lens on sexuality and of the lives of the women within it, because most of them are kind of married to men and stuff like that. So I think it's called Written on the Body. I highly recommend it. You can get it from Gaze the Word. So that's my
We love Gaze the Word.
Yeah.
Yay.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lauren.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been great chats. Yeah,
Can't wait to see your show.
Yay!
Yay!
See you at the yard. Cool.
Thank you, Lauren. That was such a great chat. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us.
It's lovely. It was lovely. So, coming up is our recommended shows for you to see. Obviously, we haven't seen them all, but these are ones that we believe will be Bechdel passing or feminist
In some way.
So, we have Becoming at Stratford Circus Art Centre from the 6th to the 9th of March. Ayo Delhi was born in London and moved to Nigeria when she was 4, living with various members of the extended family. When she was 10, she moved back to London and started school. Becoming is a one-woman musical drama that combines storytelling and original songs from Ayo Delhi Edwards' debut album to bring to life her story of growing up across 2 continents, inhabiting the different characters who have influenced her life. She explores identity, love, fear, family relationships, and migration. Sounds great.
I'm a Phoenix bitch. Our fave, Bryony Kimmings, is back at Battersea Art Centre, currently until March 9th. And then she is actually going to the Attenborough Centre in Brighton in May as well. And this is an incredible story about Bryony's postnatal breakdown, imploding relationship, and kind of recovering and becoming herself, rising from the ashes like a phoenix. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who's seen that show who hasn't come away from it being like, this is incredible. Like, everyone needs to go see it. So you do. The Paperman on at Soho Theatre until March 9th as well. The Paperman is the latest show from Improbable Theatre Company, and it centres around I've forgotten his name, Stuart Lee.
No, Lee Simpson.
Lee Simpson. Sorry, the other white man.
That's so funny. Lee Simpson.
Sorry, I don't know whether or not to keep that in.
Please do. It's so good.
Lee
Generic white man.
Generic white man. I don't know. They're fairly interchangeable.
I mean, yeah, that's the whole point, isn't it?
Sorry, Lee Simpson, who wants to create the show about this footballer whose name I can't remember because I didn't like the football side of it.
It's another white man.
Yeah, and but he decides to employ like some other performers in his piece.
He's like, I want to diversify.
In an attempt to diversify his show, because I think they realise that Improbable's track record isn't one filled with diversity, that he employs women to be in the performance with him and help create it with him, and it's about these women then changing and then shaping the play in a very different way, and kind of the negotiation between this protagonist trying to tell his story his way, but also what happens when you bring in these performers who have different backgrounds and identities and ideas of how the show should go, and the messiness of being a woman in the industry, basically.
You get a different story.
Yeah. And it's fucking tricky and complex and beautiful, and there's so many. I just really implore you to go see it. Yeah,
was the word I used.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
The next up is Boots, which is on at the Bunker until March the 16th. This is about a woman in her 30s who works as a pharmacist, and an older woman in her 70s who comes into the pharmacy really regularly, and they develop this kind of unexpectedly intimate relationship. And it's not like female friendship, because they're not like BFFs, but it's like they connect in a really interesting way, and it kind of, it's just beautiful. It's just an amazing play.
It is like one of the most favourite plays I've seen recently.
Yeah,
I honestly
like
loved it. Really, really, really loved it. It was so well written. The two performers are amazing. Also, it is about, as in Boots the pharmacist, obviously.
But also Boots the footwear.
Also, but it's kind of like about the two. You can be surprised walking in, and then you're like, there's kind of like basically the stage is a bit of a replica of kind of like Boots. And it's really amazing, especially if you're anyone who's ever worked in like customer service, like, which most people, because it just reminded me of like all those kind of people that you would meet doing the job, and how you would never really be brought together other than that kind of circumstance. And it's so beautiful. And one of the actors, I don't know about the actor, but like the character is like over 70 or over 80. There's like an older woman, and it felt, I'm kind of like embarrassed by how like new and different and kind of groundbreaking it felt to see a character of that age. And I felt it's made me really reassess.
Fully formed character.
Yeah. It
like
was,
not like someone's granny who's there for a joke.
Yeah,
like the main character, like they're it's an equal two-hander.
Yeah, so
the two of them are like equal main characters.
Yeah.
And the other one is Tanya Loretta D, who was an amazing podcast guest on here previously.
Yes.
So, yeah, you know how great she is.
I genuinely urge you to go see
amazing
Boots,
acting,
because that is one we have seen. And yeah. Anyway, moving on to another show that we've seen, And the Rest of Me Floats, which is on at the Bush, which is by Outbox Theatre. Playful and powerful, And the Rest of Me Floats explores how it feels to live in a society where you are regularly categorised and policed. Do you see me? Beyond the questions, the confusion and the anger, do you really see me? And it's a company made up of trans, non-binary and queer performers. And to see them on a big main stage, such as at the Bush, feels incredible, and feels like that more shows should be there.
Can I say, not just on the stage, but owning the stage and taking a kind of like taking the stage.
Yeah.
And also there's 7 performers. It really feels like it's not just one person. like being like, oh, I'm on stage, here's my story.
No, it's such an ensemble piece, and is beautiful, and community building as well, which I feel like often queer plays do really well. They really speak to their community. So we highly recommend And the Rest of Me Floats. It deserves a huge audience, so please go see.
Also at the Bush, there's another show on currently until March 23rd called The Trick, and The Trick is by Eve Lee and Roy Alexander Wise, and so Eve's written it, Roy's directed it, and they're a team that we first saw in a show called Stoneface that we did a post show for a few years ago, and it was just such a magical team. It was such a beautiful, harmonious working together, and we had this amazing audience conversation that I always look back on with such fondness. So when I heard they were working together, I was like, wow, this sounds amazing. And The Trick is a magic show about, the copy says, the parts of life we don't talk about, getting older and coming to terms with loss. So it's kind of about, I think it's about grief and aging, and an older couple, I think, maybe. Anyway, it uses the idea of magic and sleight of hand to think about grief and loss, and it's a team that I would totally trust with those topics, so I can't wait to see it. I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
me too.
Yeah.
Also, Inside Bitch, which is on at the Royal Court until March 23rd, so the same day as The Trick. Inside Bitch, you've seen Orange is the New Black. You've seen Locked Up. You've seen Bad Girls. So, what have we got that's different? Well, for one, we've been to prison. So, Inside Bitch is a collaboration between Clean Break and the Royal Court, and so I believe is starring or is created by people who have experience of the criminal justice system, as is all the work of Clean Break. I've only heard good things about it, to be honest. It seems
like it's smashing down all of both the assumptions and the stereotypes and the media kind of misrepresentation, glamorization, sort of the
undermining
prison
kind of,
yeah.
And this is really real. So if you are someone who has consumed those kinds of TV shows and think it is this one specific way of looking at it, go and see the show to get a dose of what the reality kind of really, really is. So that is Inside Bitch.
Richard II on a Bechdel Theatre podcast. Richard II is on at the Globe until April 21st. The thing that makes Richard II special is that it's the first ever company of women of colour in a Shakespeare play on a major UK stage. And it's Richard II because it's a reflection on what it is to be English, or it takes into account things like the Windrush anniversary, Brexit, all of these kind of things about Englishness and Britishness, and takes those themes from the Shakespeare play, and it not just has an all women of colour cast, but every single person involved in the production of the show is a woman of colour, from like stage managers, director, like literally everybody is. Lynette Linton is co-directing. Adjoa Ando and Lynette Linton are both directing this show, so it's awesome also that it's a collaboration. It's just everything about it is exciting, really.
You can't see, but I just did like raise the room. So I was trying to do like a raise the hand, like this is amazing gesture, but obviously you couldn't see it.
Yeah, all the designers are women of colour. Like every single person working on this production at every level is a woman of colour, and it's this production that's got so much to say. So exciting until April 21st. So you've got a while to see that.
Also, like the Globe is great. Like I'm so happy that like tourists will come and like get to see this production. Like that makes me.
They're like, oh, we'll just
really
go and
happy.
see a Shakespeare. We're not even really thinking about it. And then they're like, yes, you get these big questions and you get all of this richness and like, it's just brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Shakespeare, also really weird that we would have these Shakespeare focused plays, but Amelia is back. It is transferring to the Vaudeville Theatre from March the 8th to June the 15th. Amelia, oh God, if there has been no other show that I know people have responded to as passionately as they have as Amelia. I'm going to read you a bit of the copy to give you a taste of what it is. 1609, I am Amelia. Writer, wife, lover, mother, muse. 400 years ago, Amelia Bassano wanted her voice to be heard. It wasn't. Could she have been the dark lady of Shakespeare's sonnets? What of her own poems? Why was her story erased from history? Amelia and her sisters reach out to us across the centuries with passion, fury, laughter, and song. Listen to them. Let them inspire and unite us. Celebrate women's voices through the story of this trailblazing, forgotten woman. Stand up and be counted. 2019, we are Amelia. Need I say more?
You don't need to say more. The next show is 100 Words for Snow, which was actually a massive success from last year's Vault Festival. Did really well and is transferring now to Trafalgar Studios from March 5th until 30th. And it's a show that's set in the Arctic, and I think the main character, it's a one-woman show. The main character, Rory, is tracing the steps of her dad, who was an explorer, but actually he was a geography teacher. But she's following in these footsteps. She's making an expedition, and I think it's a coming of age story, but it's got this interesting twist in that's kind of about the Arctic Circle, and she kind of goes on this mission in memory of her dad, and yeah,
Sounds really sweet.
Like, yeah, we've heard really good things about it last year at Vault Festival, so I'm so excited to see shows that are put on as part of a festival then kind of get this longer life, and get another opportunity to see it. So that's another recommendation.
Also, 96 Festival, which is at Clapham Omnibus until the end of March 31st. So 96 Festival, I feel like we might have mentioned it last year, but it is back by popular demand. It is a glittery lineup of artists. Will set up camp at Omnibus Theatre for this huge event and festival. So expect cabaret, drag, burlesque theatre, art, activism, music, basically it all. The 96 Festival has been conceived in remembrance and celebration of the iconic Pride Party that happened on Clapham Common in 1996, and so it continues to keep going. So this is great. Some of our favourites are performing. You should check out the website to see who that is.
Oh, Flyons is performing.
I know, yeah, that was someone else.
Yeah, we love her. Just say it.
Yeah.
Speaking of favourites, Smack That, A Conversation, is probably one of the best pieces of theatre I've ever seen, not just in terms of like the experience you go through as an audience member, but in terms of the impact that it has on the world. Smack That, A Conversation is by Rhiannon Faith, who is a dance choreographer / live artist who has created a show with women who are have exited from relationships that have included domestic violence and abuse, and kind of gone through therapy, and then she's worked with them to create this show, which is touring to all over the UK, Essex, Portsmouth, Oxford, Salford, Newcastle, Salisbury. It's touring all the way across 2019, and it's framed like a party. So you're basically invited to a party, and you play party games, and you have a laugh, and you have a drink, and you get to meet these wonderful people who are just so real and so connected with you. It feels like you're actually at a real party, and I mean you literally are at a party, but it addresses these topics of domestic violence and abuse and coercive control and all of those things that are very heavy and not made light of, but are in a setting that allows you to kind of think about them without feeling like, oh God, I can't leave the room. I'm faced by these awful topics. And And the most incredible thing about this show is that every venue that it goes to becomes what's called a J9 venue, where anybody who is suffering from domestic abuse or wants to get advice or help exiting a relationship can go to the venue staff who've all been trained to say, I'd like to talk about J9, and then they will be given access to, they can make phone calls and they'll be given information and they'll be given help, basically assistance in that situation. So I just think it's an amazing kind of project overall, in the fact that
it's like a piece of it, the everything including the show and like surrounding the show is in itself like a piece of activism. Like, for instance, that there's also a psychologist on hand throughout the performance, and you feel very much like you could leave and go and talk to that person if you want to throughout the show. And also Rhiannon waives the rights to the show every November every year, so that people can put on the production themselves, and she's available and free to help people do that. And so we spoke to her afterwards, and she talks about how she goes to schools and works and can like work and do workshops with them. And the playtext as well is like really unlike any other playtext I've seen, where it writes out like how to basically do the show, even though the show is based, has the performers' stories in it. It's like how to make it for your own performers, and all about consent and what you're happy to explore. So I don't know, it's really like paved the way for how theatre and activism can combine in like a meaningful way, I think. So that was Smack That, a conversation. Please go see it. So much good stuff on at the moment.
honestly, it's so inspiring.
I know.
It makes me feel like, yes, there is
this is the
good in the world.
Like. Yeah. So that's us for this month. Thank you for sticking around for this long episode. Again, please come to our live podcast. It would mean so much to us.
We want to hang out with you.
Yes. If you can't, it is recorded, so you can listen to the episode anyway. But we look forward to seeing you, and we'll see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.